That is Earth's cadet. Rax Veruin asked, loud enough for the entire combat hall to hear. You brought us your weakest one. The laughter came a second later. Caleb Walker kept his eyes on the ranking board suspended 40 feet above the academy floor, where 412 names glowed in clean blue letters. His was at the bottom. Caleb Walker, Earth, physical rank, 412 of 412. For a moment, Caleb wished the floor would open and save him the trouble of standing there. He had crossed 27 light years to represent Earth at the Orion Interstellar War Academy. In less than 10 minutes after orientation, an auditorium full of alien cadets had decided humanity was a joke. That is the Deathworlder, someone called. He is smaller than my younger brother. More laughter rolled through the hall. Caleb felt heat creep up his neck. His hands tightened at his sides before he caught himself and slowly relaxed them. Commander Rachel Hayes had warned him about this before he left Earth. You are not there to win arguments. He had understood the words then. Understanding them, while several hundred strangers laughed at him, was harder. Beside him, Lyra Vin tilted her silver-gray face toward the board, then toward Caleb. The Valari cadet was nearly 6.5 feet tall, lean and sharp-featured, with dark violet eyes that seemed incapable of hiding curiosity. Your ranking is accurate? She asked. Unfortunately, you performed worse than every cadet here. Caleb glanced at her. You have a real gift for making people feel better. Lyra blinked as her translator processed the sarcasm. I was not attempting to make you feel better. Yeah, I got that. Another wave of laughter rose behind them. Caleb looked toward its source and finally saw Rax Veruin clearly. Nearly 8 feet tall, broad through the shoulders, dark blue skin marked by thin silver lines along his neck and forearms. Caleb had read his file during the flight in. Academy champion. Highest combat score in 12 years. Undefeated in sanction matches. This was not some loudmouth looking for attention. Rax had earned the confidence in his voice, which somehow made the humiliation worse. Earth's reputation appears exaggerated, Rax said. Caleb met his eyes. Every stupid instinct in him wanted to answer. Tell Rax about Earth training. Tell him rankings did not mean everything. Tell everybody in that room exactly where they could stick their jokes. Instead, Caleb remembered Rachel's voice and shoved both hands into his pockets. Lyra studied him. You are angry. Very. Yet you do nothing. Caleb looked back at the board. What would you like me to do? Fight the scoreboard. For the first time, Lyra almost smiled. High above them, behind the glass wall of the command balcony, Commandant Vaylor watched without amusement. He had spent months arguing that Earth's admission into the Interstellar Officer Exchange had been political theater. Humans had stories, legends, and a carefully polished death world reputation. Now he had numbers. Numbers did not care about legends. Walker, Vaylor called through the hall speakers. The laughter faded. Caleb looked up. Sir, step forward. Caleb walked into the center circle, painfully aware of every eye following him. Vaylor folded his hands behind his back. The Galactic Council described humanity as unusually resilient. A few cadets snickered. Perhaps, Vaylor continued, Earth would care to explain why its representative has achieved the lowest physical score in Academy history. Caleb swallowed. There were a dozen clever answers available to him, and every one would make things worse. So he gave the truth. Because I was the slowest man in my class, sir. Silence replaced the laughter for half a beat. Then Rax laughed again. Vaylor's expression softened into quiet satisfaction. Caleb saw it and understood something that bothered him more than the jokes. The Commandant had wanted this. This was not orientation anymore. Caleb was being displayed. Vaylor looked across the hall at hundreds of alien cadets, and then back down at Earth's representative. How disappointing. Caleb felt those words land harder than the laughter. Still, he said nothing. From the balcony, Vaylor mistook the silence for shame. Rax mistook it for surrender. Almost everyone in the room made the same mistake. Lyra was the only one watching Caleb closely enough to notice that the human was no longer staring at his own ranking. He was studying Rax. The first thing Caleb noticed about Rax Veruin was not his size. It was his balance. The alien champion moved across the training floor like somebody had taught gravity to cooperate with him. No wasted steps. No showboating. No nervous energy. When the next combat demonstration began, 3 senior cadets entered the circle opposite him, and Caleb stopped thinking about the laughter from orientation. Rax was good. Really good. The first cadet tried to overwhelm him with speed. Rax redirected him and sent him sliding harmlessly beyond the boundary marker. The second lasted longer, forcing Rax to adjust twice before losing position. The third was nearly 7 feet tall and built like a linebacker. Rax waited, watched, then used one clean movement to put him off balance. The buzzer sounded. Match over. The crowd erupted. Caleb leaned against the railing beside Lyra. "Okay," he murmured. "That is a problem." Lyra turned toward him. "You sound impressed." "I have eyes." Most cadets insult opponents they dislike. That does not make him slower. Below them, Rax acknowledged the crowd with a small nod. He did not need to brag. Everyone already knew who he was. A holographic panel appeared over the floor, displaying his measurements beside Caleb's results from orientation. Strength advantage, Rax. Acceleration, Rax. Reach, Rax. Reaction speed, Rax. Caleb stared at the numbers. "Well, this feels personal." Lyra looked toward the command balcony. "It is." Commandant Vaylor stepped forward. "Cadets, comparative evaluation is essential to understanding military capability. Reputation must never replace measurable evidence." Caleb felt his stomach tighten. There it was. This had never been about one embarrassing test. Vaylor was building an argument, and Caleb was the exhibit. "Cadet Walker," Vaylor called. "Join Champion Verwin on the floor." Caleb descended the stairs while hundreds of faces followed him. Rax waited inside the circle, breathing as calmly as if he had just taken a walk. Up close, the difference in size was ridiculous. "So," Caleb said quietly, "I am guessing this is not the part where we become friends." Rax's mouth curved slightly. "You use humor when uncomfortable. You should hear me at the dentist." The translator hesitated over dentist. Rax ignored it. "I expected more from Earth." Caleb's smile faded. "You have never been there. I have read your military records." "That is not the same thing." Rax stepped closer. "Then tell me, is this really what Earth considers a soldier?" The room went still enough for Caleb to hear the ventilation system overhead. He could have lied. He could have protected his pride. Instead, he shook his head. No, a few cadets laughed. Rax looked almost disappointed. Caleb finished. "I am a cadet." This time the laughter was weaker. Rax studied him for another second, then stepped away. Vaylor ordered the next evaluations. Sprint. Caleb lost. Strength platform. Caleb lost badly. Reaction chamber. He finished near the bottom again. By the end, sweat darkened the back of his academy shirt and his legs felt heavy. But he remained standing while several higher-ranked cadets sat against the wall trying to recover. Lyra noticed. So did Rax. Caleb bent forward, hands on his knees, breathing slowly. "Still think the numbers tell you everything?" he asked. Lyra checked the medical display on her wrist. "Your recovery rate makes no sense." Caleb straightened. "Makes sense where I come from." Across the hall, Vaylor watched him with narrowed eyes. A moment later, an announcement appeared over every training terminal. Tomorrow's endurance assessment had been changed. Full combat gear. Maximum gravity setting permitted by Academy safety regulations. Caleb read it twice. Lyra looked toward the balcony. "That test has not been used in 6 years." Caleb picked up his water bottle. "Guess I made an impression." Then he saw Rax reading the same announcement from across the room. The champion was no longer laughing. By 8 the next morning, Caleb had learned 2 things about Orion Academy. The coffee was terrible, and Commandant Vaylor knew exactly how to make a training exercise look like an execution without technically breaking a single safety rule. Caleb stood at the starting line wearing a 40-pound field pack while the gravity chamber climbed toward its maximum approved setting. Around him, cadets shifted uneasily as their equipment grew heavier against their shoulders. Lyra checked the display above the course. 1.7 Earth gravity, she said. "That seems excessive." Caleb rolled his shoulders beneath the pack. "I grew up in Ohio. This still beats February." Lyra stared at him. "I do not understand that statement." "Nobody does. It is an Ohio thing." Across the line, Rax was already focused on the course. Vaylor had designed it around a simple sequence: 2 miles of elevated track, a vertical climbing section, equipment transport, then a decision maze completed under physical exhaustion. The strongest cadets were expected to dominate. The signal sounded. Rax exploded forward. Caleb did not. He settled into a steady pace while faster cadets disappeared ahead of him. Within minutes, he was almost last again. Valor watched from the observation deck with visible satisfaction. Lyra passed Caleb during the first mile. You are falling behind. I noticed. Then increase your pace. No, she looked over. No. Caleb nodded toward the cadets ahead. Watch them. The answer came 10 minutes later. The first runners began slowing. Their species had evolved for short bursts of power, and the increased gravity was turning every early sprint into a debt their bodies now had to repay. Caleb kept moving. His breathing grew heavier. His legs burned. None of it surprised him. He had spent years training beside people faster and stronger than he was. Chasing them had taught him something winning never could: how to keep functioning after comfort disappeared. At the climbing wall, he passed 6 cadets. During the equipment carry, he passed 11 more. Rax remained far ahead, but even the champion had slowed. Lyra reached the decision maze seconds before Caleb. Her hands trembled as she activated the console. I cannot focus. Stop trying to go fast. Caleb set down his pack and forced himself to breathe evenly. Read the problem once. Find what matters. Ignore the rest. You are giving me advice during an evaluation. Pretty sure helping teammates is the point of an academy. Valor heard that through the monitoring system. His expression tightened. The maze presented conflicting evacuation routes, resource limits, and simulated communication failures. Cadets with extraordinary physical scores began making simple mistakes. Caleb did not solve everything perfectly, but he stayed patient. When the final signal sounded, he had climbed from near last place to 43rd overall. Lyra finished 51st. Rax took first. Caleb dropped his pack and sat on the floor, breathing hard. Rax approached him several minutes later. 43rd, he said. Congratulations. Caleb looked up. You make that sound insulting. You still lost. Never said I did not. Rax frowned. That answer seemed to bother him more than an excuse would have. Lyra crouched beside Caleb and checked her wrist display. Your strength score is poor. Your acceleration is poor. Your reflex score is below average. You really know how to celebrate. She ignored him. But your performance improves relative to others as fatigue increases. Caleb took a drink of water. That happens. Why? He considered the question. Because tired is normal. From the observation deck, Valor pulled up Caleb's Earth training records. Most remained restricted, but one line was visible. Walker, Caleb. Physical ranking at Earth Defense Academy Graduation Assessment. 287 of 301. Valor smiled. The human truly was mediocre. Then another number appeared beneath it. Endurance completion rate, 100%. Valor's smile disappeared. A message flashed across Caleb's terminal before he could stand. Report to Combat Hall at 1600 hours. Champion Verwin will conduct your evaluation. Caleb read it, then looked across the room at Rax. The alien champion had received the same message. This time, neither of them smiled. At exactly 4 that afternoon, Caleb walked into the combat hall expecting a private evaluation and found nearly every seat occupied. Cadets filled the upper galleries. Instructors lined the observation deck. Even the academy broadcast drones hovered near the ceiling. Caleb stopped just inside the doorway. Of course, he muttered. Lyra was waiting near the equipment lockers. Valor opened the evaluation to the entire academy 20 minutes ago. That was thoughtful of him. He also classified it as a comparative combat demonstration. Caleb looked toward the center floor. Rax stood inside the training circle wearing lightweight academy armor, calmly adjusting the straps around his forearms. So this is not an evaluation. No, Lyra lowered her voice. It is a message. Caleb understood immediately. Valor had tried numbers. The endurance test had complicated those numbers. Now he wanted something simpler, something everyone could understand. Earth's lowest-ranked cadet, standing opposite Ailen Academy's champion. Commander Rachel Hayes appeared on Caleb's communicator before he reached the floor. Walker. Commander. You can refuse. Caleb glanced toward Valor's balcony. And give him exactly what he wants. Rachel was quiet for a moment. Do not confuse pride with duty. I am trying not to. That was the problem. Caleb was not fearless. His stomach had been tight since lunch, and watching Rax move during yesterday's demonstration had not improved matters. Rax was faster, stronger, taller, and experienced enough to use every advantage correctly. Caleb knew what happened when somebody ignored facts because his ego wanted a different answer. What did Earth know when you sent me here? He asked. Rachel's expression changed. More than I told you. That is not comforting. The council requested a representative from the lower physical tier of our qualified cadets. Valor wanted comparative data. Caleb stared at her. You sent me because I was weak. I sent you because you qualified despite being weak. The distinction landed strangely. Before Caleb could answer, Valor's voice filled the hall. Cadet Walker, report to the floor. Rachel leaned closer to the camera. Caleb, listen carefully. You do not owe anybody a performance. He looked at Rax again. Maybe not, but I think Valor does. The connection ended. Caleb entered the circle. The crowd quieted. Valor addressed the galleries. Today we remove speculation. Champion Veruin will demonstrate the combat standard expected of an Orion cadet. Cadet Walker will provide the comparative baseline. Baseline? Caleb almost laughed. Rax approached and extended one hand, unexpectedly formal. Caleb shook it. You understand the rules? Rax asked. Controlled contact. Points for position, balance, and submission. No intentional injury. Correct. Good. Rax studied him. You are nervous. Very. You admit that easily. Lying would not make my hands stop sweating. Something changed in Rax's expression. Respect, maybe. Or confusion. The referee activated the boundary field. Caleb lowered his center of gravity. Rax did the same. The signal sounded. Rax moved first. Caleb barely cleared the opening rush, pivoting away as the champion crossed the space where he had been standing. A murmur swept through the hall. Rax turned immediately and came again, changing angle this time. Caleb retreated 2 steps, then 3. He was not trying to win. Not yet. He was watching shoulders, hips, feet, breathing. Rax accelerated. Caleb shifted left. Rax anticipated it and cut him off. Caleb lost his footing and went down hard enough to make the crowd cheer, but the safety flooring absorbed the impact. Point, Veruin, the referee announced. Caleb sat up. Okay, he whispered. That was fast. Rax offered him a hand. Caleb accepted it. Yield, Rax said quietly. There is no dishonor in recognizing a superior opponent. Caleb looked at him, then at Rax's forward foot. The same foot he had planted before every decisive movement. Caleb stood. Probably good advice. He returned to his mark. Rax frowned. Then why continue? Caleb raised his hands as the referee prepared the second signal. Because I am starting to figure you out. The second signal sounded, and this time Caleb did not retreat. Rax came forward expecting the same cautious response, but Caleb stepped toward him just enough to ruin the distance. Rax checked his movement and changed direction. Caleb slipped away before the champion could establish position. No point. A few voices in the gallery went quiet. Rax reset. Better, he said. Thanks. It will not change the outcome. Probably not. Rax paused. Caleb could almost see the answer bothering him. Most opponents protected their confidence before they protected anything else. Caleb had spent years being the guy who knew exactly where he ranked. Pride was expensive when everyone in your training group could outrun you. Rax attacked again. Caleb watched the shoulders this time. The champion feinted right, shifted left, and Caleb followed the wrong signal. Rax caught him cleanly and guided him across the boundary. Point, Veruin. The scoreboard changed to 2-0. The crowd found its voice again. Valor leaned back above the arena. This was the picture he wanted. Caleb returned to center, breathing through his nose. Lyra watched from the sideline, increasingly confused. Caleb had lost 2 exchanges, yet each one had lasted longer. Rax noticed it too. You are delaying, he said. I am learning. During the match? Best time for it. The third signal sounded. Rax accelerated, but Caleb was already moving. Not backward. Sideways. He let Rax control the center while refusing to stay where the champion expected him. 10 seconds passed. Then 20. Rax changed rhythm. Caleb changed with him. The crowd stopped cheering because nothing looked dramatic anymore. That was exactly what Caleb wanted. Rax finally committed to a fast entry. His weight shifted. Forward foot first. Shoulder followed. Caleb turned at the last possible moment and redirected him past the scoring line. The referee raised one hand. Point, Walker. Silence. Caleb stared at the scoreboard. 2-1. Huh, he said softly. That worked. Lyra actually laughed. Valor did not. Rax returned to center more slowly. There was no embarrassment on his face now. Only concentration. You baited me. I was hoping you would call it strategy. You deliberately appeared slower. Caleb shook his head. No, I am slower. That answer landed differently. Rax looked at him as if the human had just violated some basic law of combat. Caleb continued, I just do not need you to be slow. I need you to be predictable once. The gallery had gone completely still. Valor stepped toward the glass. The demonstration he had designed to settle the argument was beginning to create a new one. Rax lowered his stance. The silver markings along his arms brightened as his breathing changed. Again, the referee hesitated. Champion, the scheduled evaluation requires only 3 exchanges. Again, Rax repeated. Caleb looked toward Valor. The commandant could end it there. 2 points to 1. Rax had won. Earth remained statistically inferior. Everyone could walk away. Valor looked down at Caleb and made the decision Pride had been waiting for. Continue. Rachel Hayes stood abruptly in the diplomatic gallery. Commandant, the evaluation is complete. Valor ignored her. Rax faced Caleb. You said you were beginning to understand me. Caleb glanced at the clock, then at the champion's feet. I said I was figuring you out. There is a difference. The boundary field activated again. Rax did not rush this time. He circled. Caleb felt the shift immediately. The champion was adapting too. Good fighters noticed patterns. Great fighters changed them. For the first time that afternoon, Caleb smiled without forcing it. There you are, he whispered. Rax heard him. What? The guy everybody warned me about. Then Rax moved, and Caleb realized the easy part was over. Rax stopped fighting like a champion with an audience and started fighting like a man with something to prove. The difference was immediate. His movements became smaller, patient, harder to read. Caleb circled near the boundary, waiting for the familiar forward step that never came. You wanted me predictable, Rax said. I learned too. Yeah, Caleb replied. I was afraid of that. Rax shifted once, forcing Caleb to react, then changed direction before Caleb could recover. Caleb barely stayed inside the circle. The crowd came alive again. Valor watched from above with his hands clasped behind his back. Whatever uncertainty had entered the room was disappearing. Rax had adjusted. Order was returning. Caleb knew it too. His little advantage was gone. He could hear his own breathing now, feel the fatigue left over from the morning endurance test settling into his legs. Rax looked almost fresh. Yield, Rax said. This time there was no arrogance in it. You have demonstrated enough. Caleb almost accepted. That was the part nobody in the stands could see. He was tired. He was scared of making one stupid decision and turning a respectable loss into public humiliation. Then he noticed Valor smiling. Not at Rax. At Rachel Hayes. Caleb understood. This was never about beating him. Valor wanted Earth to admit that its reputation had been inflated. Caleb straightened. One more. Rax's eyes narrowed. Why? Because you changed your pattern. And Caleb drew a slow breath. Now I get to see what you do when the first plan stops working. The referee gave the signal. Rax advanced carefully. Caleb gave ground, but only inches at a time. Rax tested left. Caleb did not bite. A shoulder feint. Nothing. A sudden step forward. Caleb moved just enough. 15 seconds passed. 20. The room grew quiet again. Then Rax did something Caleb had not seen before. He deliberately offered an opening. Caleb recognized the trap and entered anyway. Rax turned to close it. That was what Caleb had been waiting for. He changed direction halfway through his own movement, slipped around Rax's stronger side, and touched the scoring marker on the champion's back. The referee froze for half a second. Point, Walker. 2-2. Nobody laughed. Rax turned slowly. Caleb backed toward his mark, breathing hard. Okay, he said. Now I am definitely in trouble. Rax stared at him, then gave the smallest nod. Yes. Before the referee could reset them, Valor's voice cut through the hall. Increase the difficulty. Rachel stepped forward. Commandant, no. Valor looked down at the control officer. Disable predictive assistance in the safety field. Manual scoring only. The room stirred. Lyra's head snapped toward the balcony. That protocol is for advanced championship trials. Caleb looked at the boundary lights as they changed from blue to amber. Rax looked upward. Commandant, this is unnecessary. Are you refusing an Academy combat standard, Champion Veruin? Valor asked. There it was. The trap had shifted. Valor was no longer testing Caleb alone. He was using Rax's pride against him too. Rax's jaw tightened. No, Commandant. Rachel called down to Caleb. Walker, you have authority to withdraw. Caleb looked toward her. For 1 second, he wanted her to order him out. That would make the decision easy. She did not. She trusted him with it. Caleb turned back to Rax. You know this is stupid, right? Yes. Good. I was worried it was just me. For the first time, Rax smiled. The referee moved between them. Final exchange. First clean control position ends the match. Caleb flexed his fingers and studied the alien across from him. Rax no longer looked like an enemy. He looked like another cadet who had just realized the commandant cared more about proving a point than protecting either of them. Above the arena, Valor leaned toward the glass. Begin. Rax moved. Caleb did not watch his hands. He watched his feet. Forward step. Weight transfer. Commitment. The pattern was back, but only for a fraction of a second. Caleb stepped directly toward the strongest fighter in the academy. Caleb stepped into Rax's advance instead of away from it, and for one strange second the entire combat hall seemed to lose its voice. Rax had expected distance. Caleb gave him none. The champion shifted to compensate, but his forward foot was already planted and his weight had committed. Caleb turned with the motion, caught Rax at the forearm and shoulder, and redirected the momentum across his own center line. He was not trying to overpower him. That would have been ridiculous. Rax had nearly twice his mass and enough raw strength to dominate every physical test they had taken. Caleb only needed gravity to stay neutral. Rax stumbled 1 step. Caleb moved with him. 2 steps. Rax recovered faster than Caleb expected and began turning out of the position. Caleb felt the opening disappearing. He remembered instructors back on Earth yelling the same lesson until everyone hated hearing it. If the first plan fails, do not admire the failure. Move. Caleb changed his grip, shifted his hips, and let Rax's effort provide the rest. The champion went down onto the padded training surface with Caleb maintaining controlled position beside him. A sound escaped the gallery, not quite a gasp and not quite a cheer. Rax immediately tried to rise. Caleb expected that too. He changed angles, secured the control position required by Academy rules, and waited. Control established, the referee said. Nobody reacted. The referee looked at the manual timer. 3 seconds. 4. 5. Match. The buzzer sounded. Caleb released Rax immediately and backed away. For several seconds, the only sound in the hall was the hum of the amber boundary field. Caleb looked toward the scoreboard. Walker, 3. Verwin, 2. He stared at it longer than anyone else. Well, he said under his breath. That is going to cause paperwork. Lyra covered her mouth, somewhere between disbelief and laughter. Rachel Hayes simply closed her eyes for a second, as if a question she had carried across 27 light years had finally been answered. Rax remained seated on the mat. Caleb approached carefully. You good? Rax looked at the offered hand. Then he took it. Caleb helped only enough to let the champion find his own balance. Rax stood and stared at him. There was no rage in his expression. That almost made the moment heavier. You knew, Rax said. Knew what? That I would correct my stance. Caleb shook his head. I guessed. You risked the match on a guess? Educated guess. Rax glanced at the scoreboard. That distinction is not helping. A few cadets laughed, but it sounded different now. Valor's voice cut through the room. Hold position. The laughter died instantly. Caleb turned toward the balcony. Valor was standing rigidly behind the glass. The result is under review. Rax's expression hardened. For what reason? Cadet Walker's performance is inconsistent with his measured capabilities. Caleb exhaled. There it is. Valor ordered a full equipment scan. Medical officers checked Caleb's academy gear, biometric record, training uniform, and identification implant. Nothing unusual appeared. Run it again, Valor ordered. Rachel stepped forward. You have your result. I have an anomaly. No, Rachel said. You have a result you do not like. The room went silent again. Valor looked down at her. A cadet ranked last in this institution does not defeat its champion without an explanation. Rachel's expression stayed calm. Then ask a better question. Valor turned toward Caleb. Very well. Cadet Walker, were you enhanced before arriving at this academy? No, sir. Were your entrance results intentionally falsified? No, sir. Are you concealing prior elite combat service? Caleb almost smiled. I am 22. Valor ignored the reaction from the gallery. Then explain this. Caleb looked at Rax, then at the hundreds of cadets who had laughed at him only yesterday. He is stronger than me. Faster too. Probably always will be. Valor's patience finally cracked. Then how did you win? Caleb considered the question. Before he could answer, Rachel activated her diplomatic terminal. Commandant, Earth authorizes release of Walker's qualifying record. A new document appeared above the arena. Caleb looked up and felt his stomach drop. He knew those numbers. Everyone could see them now. 287 out of 301. Valor stared at the ranking, then slowly looked toward Rachel. This confirms my point. He was near the bottom. Rachel nodded. Yes. Valor waited. Rachel did not soften the next words. And he passed. The commandant's face changed. Rachel brought up a second file. You tested how strong he is when rested, how fast he is when comfortable, how quickly he reacts when he knows what is coming. More Earth evaluation categories appeared across the display. Decision-making under fatigue, environmental adaptation, stress recovery, opponent analysis, performance under disadvantage. Caleb watched Valor read them. The commandant had wanted an explanation. Now, for the first time, he looked uncertain whether he actually wanted to hear it. Valor read the Earth evaluation categories twice before speaking. These are not combat metrics. Rachel Hayes gave him a level look from the diplomatic gallery. That is exactly the problem. A new section of Caleb's record appeared above the arena. It did not show secret enhancements, classified missions, or some hidden championship history. It showed ordinary failures. Sprint ranking, 294. Upper body strength, 281. Reaction drills, 276. Caleb watched several alien cadets exchange confused looks. Valor pointed toward the numbers. You are proving that he is below average. Physically, Rachel said. Yes. Caleb rubbed the back of his neck. Commander, you are really selling me here. A few cadets laughed. Even Rax gave a quiet breath that might have been amusement. Rachel continued. Earth Defense Academy does not require every cadet to be the strongest person in the room. That would be impossible. It requires them to remain useful when the strongest person in the room is no longer enough. The display changed. Caleb's other results appeared. Fatigue decision accuracy, 96%. Stress recovery, top 8%. Adaptive problem solving, top 4%. Training completion under disadvantage, 100%. Lyra stared upward. 100%. Caleb glanced at her. I am stubborn. That is apparently measurable. Valor stepped closer to the glass. Then Earth deliberately trained him to compensate for physical inferiority. Rachel shook her head. Life trained him to compensate. We simply stopped pretending disadvantage was unusual. Rax looked at Caleb differently now. You trained against stronger humans. Most days. How often did you win? Caleb thought about it. Not often enough to get annoying about it. That is not an answer. Maybe 1 out of 4 at first. Better toward graduation. Rax seemed genuinely puzzled. And you continued? Caleb looked at him. What else was I supposed to do? Ask everybody bigger than me to leave. That landed harder than Caleb intended. The room became quiet. Rax had spent most of his life as the favorite. Caleb had spent his learning how to function when he was not. Valor turned back to Rachel. Why send him here? Rachel paused, and Caleb noticed it immediately. Commander? She looked down at him. Because Orion requested Earth's weakest qualified combat cadet. Caleb's face changed. You never told me that. I know. You could have mentioned it somewhere between Earth and 27 light years away. Would you have come? Caleb opened his mouth, then stopped. Rachel had her answer. Valor looked almost triumphant. So Earth admits Walker was selected because he was weak. Yes, Rachel said. Valor smiled. Then this spectacle proves nothing about humanity. Rachel leaned against the railing. Commandant, Caleb ranked 287 out of 301. Exactly. You still do not understand. Her voice remained calm. There were 14 cadets below him. Valor frowned. Then he was not your weakest. They did not qualify. The smile disappeared. Rachel brought up the graduation standards. Every category had a minimum requirement. Endurance, judgment, recovery, adaptation, team performance. Caleb had cleared every line. Barely in some places, comfortably in others, but he had cleared them. You asked for the weakest person Earth considered ready, Rachel said. We sent him. Nobody moved. Rax looked from the records to Caleb. You are actually near the bottom. Caleb gave him a tired smile. Been trying to tell everybody that since yesterday. Lyra stared at him. Then what are your strongest cadets like? Caleb's smile faded. Different problem. Valor immediately closed the public display. This evaluation is concluded. He turned away from the glass, but Rax called after him. No, the single word stopped the room. Valor slowly turned back. Rax stepped beside Caleb rather than opposite him. You used me to prove he did not belong here. Valor's voice cooled. Choose your next words carefully, Cadet Verowan. Rax looked at the scoreboard, then at the Earth qualification record. I think we tested the wrong cadet. Valor's eyes narrowed. Explain. Rax faced the command balcony. Tomorrow morning, test me by Earth standards. Caleb turned toward him. Rax. The champion did not look away from Valor. If their weakest qualified cadet can survive our system, I want to know whether our strongest can survive theirs. This time, when the combat hall fell silent, Valor had no answer ready. By 6 the next morning, the academy had changed the scoreboard. Caleb noticed it before he noticed the crowd. The old ranking still showed him near the bottom in strength, speed, and reaction time, but beside it was a new category, Adaptive Combat Index. His name sat at number 1. That seems dramatic, Caleb said. Lyra stood beside him with a cup of something the cafeteria insisted was coffee. You defeated the academy champion. I got one good opening. You found the opening. That sounds less embarrassing. Across the training floor, Rax was finishing the Earth qualification course he had demanded. He had dominated the opening stages. Then the rules changed. He was given conflicting instructions while exhausted. Equipment failed without warning. The simulated mission objective shifted halfway through. By the final section, raw strength offered almost nothing. Rax finished anyway. He missed Earth's qualification mark by 11 points. Nobody laughed. Caleb understood why. Rax had volunteered to be measured by a system built around his weaknesses, and he had stayed until the end. When Rax crossed the final marker, he bent forward, breathing hard, then looked toward Caleb. 11 points. First attempt. I failed. Caleb walked over and handed him a bottle of water. Yeah. Rax stared at him. That is all. What do you want me to say? Something comforting. Caleb thought for a second. The coffee is worse than your score. Rax laughed despite himself. Above them, Commandant Valor entered the observation deck. The room quieted by habit. He looked at the new ranking board, then at Rax. The Earth assessment will not become Academy standard. Rachel Hayes stepped beside him. Nobody asked it to. Valor glanced at her. Then what exactly was the purpose of this? Rax answered from the floor. To discover what our rankings could not tell us. Valor's expression tightened. Rax continued. I spent years being told that the strongest cadet was the best prepared cadet. Yesterday, the weakest man in the room found a problem I could not solve with strength. Caleb looked uncomfortable. I would really like everyone to stop calling me that. Lyra smiled. You created the problem by admitting it. Valor looked around the hall. The cadets who had laughed 2 days earlier were listening now. He could dismiss Earth's methods, but he could not erase what they had seen. Finally, he spoke. Cadet Walker's original physical ranking will remain unchanged. Caleb nodded. Fair. His adaptive ranking will also remain. That surprised everyone, including Rachel. Valor looked directly at Caleb. Do not mistake acknowledgement for admiration. Would not dream of it, sir. Valor left without another word. It was not an apology. Caleb did not need one. Later that morning, he carried his breakfast tray toward an empty table and found Rax pulling out the chair across from him. Lyra joined them a moment later. Rax placed his training schedule on the table. Teach me. Caleb looked up. Teach you what? How to operate when I am not the strongest. Caleb studied him. 2 days earlier, Rax had been the person laughing loudest. Now he was asking the guy ranked 287th back home for help. There was something strangely decent about that. 6 tomorrow morning, Caleb said. Rax frowned. Why 6? Caleb took a sip of coffee and immediately regretted it. Because that is when the weak cadets train. Lyra laughed. This time Rax did too. Across the cafeteria, nobody stared at Caleb because they feared him. That was never the lesson. They watched because their definition of strength had changed. Caleb had spent years believing the names above his on a scoreboard proved something was missing in him. Now he understood what all those losses had quietly given him. Strong people learn what they can do. People who struggle learn what they can do when they cannot do enough. One lesson builds confidence. The other builds endurance. Neither matters much until life stops being fair. Somewhere on Earth, 14 cadets who had once ranked below Caleb were probably waking before sunrise and trying again. Caleb smiled at the thought. Being last was never the same thing as being finished.